rebellion, the government decides to exile anyone of influence from the eastern provinces. Basically tribal leaders and religious leaders, which includes Sayyid Nursi. So it's taken, they're all taken under soldier, escorted to city of Isparta. Isparta is a city, and then over there a few months they find that, well, Sayyid Nursi, he's having following. You know, people are, he's very famous by then. And so, oh, Sayyid Nursi is here. And Isparta, by the way, they make a mistake because all of the madrasa students, scholars came from that city. And so people were very much used to, they sent them to the wrong place. And they realized that, and after a few months, they take only Sayyid Nursi away into this village called Barla. And at that time, that village, the only way you can get to it is you cross a very large lake by boat, you jump on a donkey, for a few kilometers you ride on the donkey to get to the village. That's the only transport. Basically, send into oblivion. You can't influence anybody. But how wrong can you get? Because that's when he starts writing Risale-i-Nur, and he's most influential after that. I went to that village actually in 2008 because I just wanted to go, you know, what kind of it's still very small because it gets a lot of visitors these days. They have a bit of a hotel and a nice mosque and so on, but still it's small. And I actually went to the house he was staying in. It was perhaps, it had just 2 rooms, but rooms were 2 meters by 3 meters. 2 meters by, we have an architect here that wouldn't even qualify as a room, you know, in this, and maybe a very small kitchen, that's it. And that's where he was staying. And that's when all these villages, obviously, he attracts people wherever he goes, naturally being a scholar and famous. And they call them Sayda. Sayda is like a Sayyid in the Eastern way. So he starts writing Risale-i-Nur, his books. The words, the letters, and the flashes, rays, they all come after this era. All 6,000 pages, all up. And they are, because by then they changed the alphabet, like the alphabet in the New Turkish Republic is changed from the Arabic alphabet to Latin alphabet. So basically, that automatically makes everybody illiterate in the country. And so, but he writes his books in the Arabic alphabet, initially for about 20 years, and later they printed in the New Latin in the 1940s. But because at that time also madrasas are closed, so you cannot establish a madrasa anymore. Zawiyas are closed, all the Sufi lodges are closed. Mosques, most of them are ineffective, they don't put imams. And even there is what they call it, the state fully controls education. Nothing else. You cannot print books written in Arabic alphabet. So what's the solution? People reproduce it by hand. So his students reproduced these books by hand. And even there was a village of Sav, he called it the factory of Risale-i-Nur, you know, the printing factory. Basically everybody in the city were copying. They were working in the farms during the day. At night they were copying. Women, children, men, and they were taken, you know, secretly throughout and distributed throughout Turkey. They say that 600,000 copies were produced by hand of the books. You can see the amount of effort. And that was the only thing you can do, basically. You know, just write books, and even that was too much for the authorities. And in 1935, he's arrested and charge for writing books that would, or establishing a secret organization to undermine the secular state and exploiting the religious sentiments of the people for that aim. That was the charge. And the evidence is all these writings. And well, obviously you can't find anything. If you really read Risala, it's about Tawheed, existence of God, the Quran, the Prophet, peace be upon him, resurrection and so on. And they're very powerful in terms of its style and proofs that it brings. But what they could find was a piece about tasattur, which is the hijab, why women should cover themselves. And that was actually written before 1923. So they used that as evidence to put a court case. They can't find anything in the end acquitted. But during the trial time, he's always locked up in the prison. And then he's released, this time sent to another city, thinking that, well, he's influential there, now he's got all these followers, let's send him to another city, nobody knows him. Actually, it's actually helping him spread across the whole country, Kastamonu. And he continues his writings there. In 1943, he is imprisoned again. And this time, it was about a piece on the signs of the Day of Judgment, you know, how his interpretations of that, and they thought that was political interpretations. And again, a big trial. And in these trials, in this time, he's put him into a single room. But before, in the first one, they put him in a dormitory, like 100 people in this big hall. And Sayyid Nursi was saying to his students, great, we cannot establish a madrasa, let this be our madrasa Yusufiyya, the school of Yusuf alayhi salam. Because outside I'm in house arrest, they won't even let you visit me. Here we've got hundreds of you. Let's continue studying. And he actually starts teaching in the prison. And even there are other murderers, all these guys are in there. And they also take part in the lessons. And these murderers become they start getting faith. And they can't even kill an insect. Actually, Sayyid Nursi uses that as in his defenses later, is when they say, you guys are a security threat to the nation. Because what are you talking about? Show me one of my students who have done anything wrong, any crimes. Because on the contrary, when we are put into prison, we rehabilitate the criminals. They don't commit crimes anymore. And so this time, well, authorities learned from that. This time they put him in a single cell. But, you know, some of the guards smuggle cigarette paper. He still writes it on these cigarette papers. Because in those days they used to roll cigarettes, very thin, small papers, and put it into matchboxes and throw it from the gutters. And someone would take it and then that would be spread. And also, in that, it was winter at that time. One night they break the windows. They break the windows so that it'll be cold. Remove his bed from the cell. And this is 1943, you know, he is 70 years old. Basically, they want him to die, freeze to death. And then they come in the morning, they find him standing up and making zikr, Hasbi Rabbi Jallallah, Ma fi ghaybi ghayrullah, Nur Muhammad sallallah, La ilaha illallah. He's repeating that constantly. And gets energy with that, of course, and he survives the night. He's actually been attempted to poison a number of times, and he showed sometimes to some of his students a black spot under his skin. He says, this was never there. The poison goes there and accumulated there, according to, so it doesn't affect his body. And he's also, while he was in prison, the manager of the prison, he actually sees him at the Friday prayer. He goes, who let him out? He comes in prison. He goes, no, he was always here. So all these amazing things happen around that, around him. And eventually he's released again, but again spends time in prison for nothing. And you know, it's World War II. His students are asking him, they notice that he's not listening to newspaper, or he's not reading newspapers, and he's not listening to the radio. They were the two main sources of news at that time. They ask him, is there something more important than the war that's ravaging the world at the moment? He says, yes, there is. What could it be? Because these superpowers in the world, Europe, Japan, all of that, they're fighting for domination of the world. And even if they are victorious and they dominate, it's going to be only for a short time. This world for a short time, and then someone else will take over. But every human being has losing or winning before them, the losing and winning of 4 times the earth in afterlife. You know, the Prophet ﷺ said that the person who gets out of hell last to enter the paradise will get 4 times the reward of the earth. So he goes, that's the minimum you can get. So winning and losing that is before you. So which one do you go for? That's for eternal life. What's more important? I think this is more important. So basically it directs people's attention to, once again, the issue of salvation and Iman. This may appear a little bit, you know, okay, what there are politics, there are all these wrong things that are happening in the world, but you start with that, you see. And the movement of Sayyid Nursi that he inspired, he has 2 very important principles. There's no politics and no violence. No politics and no violence. No politics because he says 2 reasons. He goes, one, because when you go with a religious message, people have to trust you. People have to trust your intentions as well, so that they will see the beauty and the truth of your message, religious message, which are like diamonds. They're very valuable. But when you go with politics, political message, people will doubt your intentions and will see those diamond-like truths as glasses, because you're going to diminish their value. That's one. The second reason is that, he goes, I saw this early, towards the late Ottoman era, because there were still political parties then, even though there was monarchy. He says that I saw a man, 2 guys who were on different sides of the political spectrum. Both of them were very good. One of them he was a scholar, very pious man. Because he was on the opposite political party, the other scholar treated him like shaitan, like Satan. But he had someone else with him on his political side who was very relaxed in his morals. He treated him like an angel. Because when I saw that, he goes, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim wa siyasa." This is famous. I seek refuge from Allah from shaitan and politics. Because it makes you see, you no longer see the principle. And it's the ideology dominates the person. And that's very wrong. It's against the Quranic approach and the prophetic approach. And also non-violence, which I gave the example of the rebellion that he was invited to. So no matter what happens, positive action. Right? We are enjoined with constructive activism. Even people treat you badly, oppress you, we must act positively. That's the Muhammadi character. and that's the message of Islam. So eventually, in 1950, democracy comes to Turkey. By the way, a lot of scholars left Turkey after the Republic and abolishment of the Caliphate. They went to Egypt, chiefly. And he never left. They asked him why, and he said, well, the Caliphate fell in this land, it will rise in this land one day. In a sense that, I think he was saying that this country needs it, basically. And actually, thanks to him, the fate of an entire nation is saved. Obviously, he's an instrument, but still an important instrument. And you know, he wasn't always, he wasn't popular with everybody. There were other sheikhs and perhaps some imams who were kind of, I don't want to say envious maybe, or they didn't understand his approach. And they were critical of him. And actually, this makes him pretty sad, because sometimes when this kind of criticism comes from your camp, it's the most hurtful. And he's got this writing, he goes, I'm trying to save the faith of my nation, entire generation. Because there's a fire out there, in it my faith is burning, the faith of a whole youth generation is burning, and I'm trying to go with a bucket of water trying to put out the fire, and as I'm running, I trip over somebody, and then he's trying to say, why are you tripping me over? He's arguing with me. He goes, why? What's the big deal? And he goes, narrow minds, narrow hearts. He makes this point. But he goes, I'm putting out this fire, and if I can achieve that, he goes, even if I go to hell, my heart will be in paradise. And once he goes, he's really frustrated, he goes, he complains about people not hearing him. And he says, I want to talk to the generations in the future, the Ahmeds, the Saids, Hassans, Omars, of 300 years later. He goes, what can I do? I came in winter. But they will come at the time of spring. And as they collect the flowers of spring, perhaps they will bring and leave some on my grave. And I will hear their footsteps. He's got sometimes, he's a very reasonable, when you read his writings, he proves and argues, but he's a very emotional and spiritual person as well at the same time. So in 1950, democracy comes, the pressures are relieved a little bit. There's another party who's an alternative party is elected by people. And kind of Said Nursi supports democracy, or at least choice of running the people's making choice of who runs the country. But still, media and other things are still being critical of him, showing him as a backward person. They take his photos, because he's still dressed in traditional clothing. They put it on front page saying this guy's, they call it irtija, you know, they're going to take you backward. But actually, they do the opposite. More and more people find out about him, they're curious about his writings, and actually spreads more, especially amongst the young people. In 1952, there's a third court case. This time he writes a book called, in 1947, he writes a book called A Guide to the Youth. And the courts find that dangerous. And they are, again, when you read it, there's nothing to do with politics or dangerous. Actually, usually in these court cases, they give these books to experts and they give a report, like the theologians or scholars. They always say, oh, there's nothing wrong with it, it's all theology. But they find something else to find him guilty. And in these court cases are sometimes interesting, you know. And in one of the court cases, for example, they're saying him, like, why are you going through all of this? Just abandon what you're doing. And he goes, this is very important because I want to help the saving or salvation, saving the Iman of the generations. Because even if I have 100 heads and you cut my one head every day, I still would not stop what I'm doing. And in another court case, he's in now approaching 80 years old, or 75, 80, and they stand really big, like leading a massive secret organization. And he goes, "You gentlemen," speaks to the judges, "look at me. I'm an old man, living by myself. I don't even have a family. You put me in house arrest easily, you put me in jail easily. Why are you scared of me? If you're scared of me for my own individual sense, you've got nothing to be fearful of. I'm just an old man. But if you're fearful of me because of my role as the announcer of the truths of the Quran, know that I'm more powerful than 50,000 people." And the judges are put back in their seats. He goes, "Now I got to pray, it's time for prayer." Puts his prayer mat and starts praying in the masjid, in the courtroom. Like, he's never apologetic, but he always puts really good arguments. Actually, we have his defense arguments, and he's always saying that his writings have nothing political, and the people who write are actually become good people, good citizens, that they can never see anyone who's doing anything wrong, crimes. Yeah, so he's acquitted again, and this time he's a little bit more free to go. His students buy a car, so he can go from city to city. Eventually, in 1960, he says, okay, we're going to Urfa. Urfa is in northern Syria, a city within Turkey, but in northern Syria. It's the town of Edessa, the ancient town of Edessa. And he goes, we're going there. And he goes, and again, he never went to East for 25 years because he comes from that region and authorities are very fearful that he's going to go and start some rebellion or something. So everyone's alarmed. So Nursi is going to Urfa, and he goes to the hotel. The Prime Minister, ministers, police chiefs, all of these guys, army, tanks, everybody goes there, and people gather actually, they hear that he's there. They just want to see him, and meet him, that's all. No one's going to do a rebellion or anything. And the governor of the city comes. He goes, I'm ordered to take you out. He goes, I'm not going anywhere. You're going to wash my body. I'm going to die here, and you're going to wash my body. And he leaves, and basically he falls sick, and within a week or so he passes away in 1960. And he's buried in a place called there's a place in Urfa where it's believed that Ibrahim alayhi salam is thrown into fire. And there's a lake, you know how it becomes water and then kind of a garden, and there's fish in that. It's believed that those fish were the wood, kind of, that were making the fire. And he was buried there. I went to that place as well. His burial place is still marked today. I say it's still marked because he's taken out of that place 3 months later. 3 months later, there's a military coup that happens. One night, soldiers come, they take away his body, they exhume him, and it's been 3 months and his body is still fresh. And the soldiers say, as if it was buried yesterday. And they take it to an unknown place in Turkey. We still don't know where he's buried. So that is Sayyid Nursi's life. He leaves a big mark. His books are very influential around the... a lot of scholars read it, by the way, even if they don't tell you that. I really strongly encourage you to read his book. It's a brilliant piece of writings. They give the modern Islamic worldview, or an authentic Islamic worldview and thinking, a blueprint for that would solve all of our problems, really. I say blueprint because the beginning is how we think now in this day and age. As people who believe in Tawheed, believe in Quran and Islam, and that we see our solutions also from the Islamic. We are inspired through the Quran to find solutions. But as you know, today everybody claims that, and they're doing all sorts of wrong things. So how can we do that peacefully and effectively? And in a way that will make people, Muslims or non-Muslims, appreciate it and accept it, and allow Muslims to do that. I think there's an answer there, and especially his non-political, non-violent approach, positive action approach is very important for the present day situation of the Muslim world. Thank you. Inshallah.
Okay, we have time for some questions, yeah?
I have a question regarding what you mentioned before. Unfortunately, in our time, some Muslims against other Muslims because of life, or they love this dunya. For example, some Muslims, their intention to teach Islam in some places, I can't mention, but I realized, because of, they not teach Islam because of Allah or of da'wah, but because of position in the place where they teach in it, or they want to be a leader. And they do not have the conditions for leader conditions. Do you think this related to the sentence you have mentioned today, tonight, before in this class about the disease in faith? Do you think it's related to disease in faith?
Of course, yeah. Everything goes back to one's faith and whether we truly appreciate Tawheed. That do we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if an afterlife, as we do 2 + 2 = 4, with that certainty. I think people have clouds in I'm not saying they're not believers, but our beliefs usually are clouded or dim. It's like when you look at a star at night, it looks very dim, right? But if you go close, it's so powerful and very bright. So our Iman could be like that. It sort of diminishes. That's one thing. Second aspect is there's a lot of still nationalism, negative nationalism. Said Nursi actually wrote about that. If our topic is Said Nursi today, I'll give the answer from him. He says there's a negative nationalism and there's positive nationalism. Negative nationalism is when you see yourself superior to other races or ethnicities by virtue of your birth. But he says the Quran teaches us in Surah Hujurat, verse 13, that, O humanity, I have created you from a single couple and split into nations and tribes so that you may get to know one another. He focuses on that. He says then there's a positive nationalism is when you see yourself and your people, what's our gift to the world? What's our gift to Islam? And when we think like that and we give rather than take, because that's when our sort of ethnic differences mean something. So we can celebrate diversity but still unify. He says our God is one, our book is one, the Prophet is one. We have so many ones that unites us. Let's not focus on the things that divides us. In terms of the ikhlas or sincerity, he has 2 pieces of writings in his book of Lem Alar, which is flashes. 20th and 21st flash. 20th flash talks about 7 reasons why Muslims can't unite. And he gives answers for that. And really interestingly, once again, we usually think, oh, it's jealousy, it's this, that, negative things. He actually, his reasons are, our strengths are the reasons why we don't unite. Because he says, when a Muslim thinks he needs help, he just prays to Allah. He expects Allah to help him. He never goes to his Muslim brother to help, for help. Whereas the people of dunya, or like disbelievers, because they don't believe in God, they seek help from one another, and they succeed, because they work together. And that's just one example from his explanations. So sometimes your strength could be your weakness, unfortunately.
But it's very...
It happens now. It explains to... You get a sheikh, he says, I don't need the community, I don't need anyone, just me is enough. All I need is 20, 30, 40 followers, a masjid, and then I'll do the work for the entire community. And I'll represent all of Islam, all of Muslims. We have this race to represent Muslims to authorities or people of Australia. I mean, why are we doing that? We don't need to do that. We need a common front. Because the Sayyid Nursi also, he says, the materialistic philosophy, which is at the core of modernity and all negative things you see in the world, is hitting you as a front, as a unified front. So our response must be unified as well. That's the only way to address it. Again, in a constructive sense. You never take on war, you know. So the second one piece, which is more individual ikhlas, he talks about, he says, people should never do things for money. Like, and hubb al-jah, like hubb al-jah, which is love of fame. Because this is the sicknesses from shaitan. He actually has another piece, he calls it hujmat al-sitta, like the 6 things that shaitan attacks you. And one of them is fame. Because even sometimes when a person is not doing it for money, he can do it for fame. Even sometimes I'm not a very famous guy, but you know, sometimes people know you around, or it may come to the mind, because maybe I should become famous, I can help more people. But that's a trap. Because you will be famous if you help people. If you help enough people that they talk about it in a positive sense, and you can get famous. You don't need to be famous to help people. You know. So actually he says the Quran criticizes people for selling verses for a little money. Because this is a threat from the Quran, and we can't do that. And he never received payment for what he did. Even when he was in Darul Hikmat al-Islamiyah, getting that salary, he was very troubled by that. And as I said, he spent some of it to printing books, and the others just for his mere survival. And when he died, I think he had 50 lira or something like that, like $50. That's it. His basket, the copy of Quran, his prayer mat, that's what he left. And he actually says that the reason why he did not get married was he saw his friends, like scholarly friends, staying quiet, and some of them even actively promoting wrong things for the fear of losing their jobs. Because if they lose their jobs, they cannot provide for their family. Because I don't have nothing to work. I just need a bed, you know, a piece of bread. That's it. That's enough for me. I don't need to worry about anybody. So that, he explains, that's one of his reasons why he did not get married, because that would have really taught him. Again, marriage is sunnah. He goes, I couldn't do only 2 sunnah in my life. That was one of them. Second one was bead. Because the other reason was, because I spent my life in travel, battlefields, prisons, house arrests, exiles. Because I didn't have time to get married, and I'm always thinking, trying to help people. He has this piece writing towards the end of his life, which is very touching, because I was wondering why did Qadar Ilahi, he doesn't say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says Qadar Ilahi, permitted all this to me. Because in my life I have never tasted worldly pleasure. Never. I spent my life in prisons, exiles, battlefields, oppression and so on. Why would Qadar Ilahi allow this? Because later I discovered the reason. Because because of my suffering, all people could see was haqiqat, which is the truth. Not even my comforts or my even salvation in afterlife was in the way of haqiqah, truth, so that it can be fully shine and people could see it. And this is why these writings are very effective. Because I'm not saying anything new. And he goes, if that's the reason, it's good that it happened. Alhamdulillah. I can die peace of mind. He even says, sometimes I thought about suicide. I mean, it comes to you when you're oppressed like that, you're in pain and suffering, injustice. I mean, obviously, he goes, if my religion didn't prevent me, I would have done it. Yeah. Yeah, so unfortunately, sister, that's why we have a problem. We don't have enough sincere or absolutely sincere people. Like sometimes Shaitan talks to us and say, those who are teachers in leadership positions, he says, but you are a leader, you're sacrificing your time, energy, you deserve it. You deserve a large salary, you deserve a good house. After all, everybody has it, everyone has a house, everyone has, so what? But the thing is, like if you drive a brand new car, it'll be all right. People will say, yeah, good on you, brother. You're earning money and you're rich. Good, But if I drive a brand new car, you may start saying, where did you get that money from? Why are you driving a new car? Because I'm in a position of, teaching religion. For that reason, I'm driving a 2007 Toyota Corolla. Yeah. Look, having said that, people, like, the leaders are human beings too, they're not perfect. So unless they do very wrong things, here and there we have to be tolerant of them as well. But obviously, they need to question themselves, leaders, and because leaders or scholars are the beacons of this community, ummah. The Muslims find strength in them. Just the story of Sayyid Nursi. When I heard that statement, if I have 100 heads and you cut away one head, when I was a 19-year-old guy, I was amazed by that. It really inspired me. I thought people like that existed in books of history. I thought, wow, So that really gives you strength. That becomes an example to you in a positive sense. So the community needs really leaders who can epitomize the Islam and its character and the character of the Prophet ﷺ. Yeah.
Thank you, Brother Mehmet. You just mentioned that he when he found a resolve in his approach, that he abandoned 90 books that he put to memory. I guess the question is, if someone wants to seek knowledge in this time and age, what's important in terms of Islam? Obviously there's a lot of books, There's a lot of classical books, there's a lot of
Oh,
modern
yeah.
books. So did Sayyid Nursi have, like I guess, a preferred approach or preferred methodology in terms of priority of knowledge?
Okay, a good question. See, when we say he abandoned those books, he didn't, obviously it was still in his memory, but he abandoned the daily recital. Because he was spending 3 hours a day just going through all the books so that it can stay in his memory. I don't know, we don't know how much of it stayed in his memory. I would say a big chunk of it. But what he says is that in his another place, he says the main problem in this world, in this modern times, is that if religion comes to you in the guise of philosophy and science, in the past, if religion used to come as individual entity, not through knowledge. So it was easy to deal with. And it was a small number of people who were known as Zindaka or Zindik. They were seen as atheists. And you could deal with that. People would shun them away. But now it's coming through science and philosophy and going into your school books. Even a couple of, I'll come to that. So he says, so we have to, unfortunately all of our classic books are written with the assumption that you already have faith. So the moment somebody doubts faith, has doubt or serious doubts, all those books are ineffective. I mean, it'll be good for you, maybe you already have a good grounding in faith and you want to even go further. There's nothing wrong in studying the classic texts. But you have to have a firm foundation on tahqiq al-Iman, which is what his books give. He says somewhere that, because alhamdulillah, like in our time everything's fast, because people don't have the time to reach to these truths. It would take a lifetime. But alhamdulillah, if you read these books, he says, for 1 year, paying attention and understand it, you will be the scholar of this time. I can tell you from the experience of reading that he's true, he's right. You know why? Because you go out there, get out of your own immediate circle of brothers who are believers, who are also doing right. Get out to the community and say, what are the questions you ask? They'll ask you Iman-related questions. So you study in a madrasa for 15 years, you won't be able to answer those questions effectively. So basically, but if you study his works, you will be able to answer immediately. I'll give you one anecdote. Years ago, 2004, I think. I studied for some time by then, but I never studied, admittedly, philosophy at that time. And since then, I read a few works at the introductory level. But I was asked to speak in Sydney University with 2 professors. One of them was a professor of philosophy. The other one was professor of ideas. And we're going to talk about, religion. And alhamdulillah, I was able to deal with that, with these guys. The questions that are raised, able to address it effectively because I used Sayyid Nursi's arguments. And afterwards they said to me, where did you study philosophy? And this is at that time I really understood that, Sayyid Nursi never covers philosophical things. He never says this is what they say and here's what you say. But he gives you the answers without talking about their views. It's only when you're confronted with it, you immediately have the answer if you studied his works. So that's why you will be the scholar of this time, because you will be able to address the questions, Iman-related questions of most people. Whereas other books don't really give you that. In terms of other study, I reckon, in my opinion, you have to have a core study from Risale-i Nur, and then you can study anything you want. and you'll get something from anything. And that's how it should be, like one foot in a firmly grounded in Tawheed, Quran, and the other foot you can roam around anything. But there is, of course, a way to study. We have to get a basic knowledge in all disciplines, especially usul subjects. And then, as Imam Ghazali recommends, that we excel in one, sort of go deeper in at least one, and maybe two if you have time in the intelligence, because he says you can't study everything. So I would say that once you're grounded firmly, then choose an area and really deepen your knowledge in that. Like for me personally, I like the three things, areas: theology, Islamic history, and contemporary issues. So those are the areas I'm always reading and trying to develop my knowledge. And when we read, we need to read for ideas and arguments, not necessarily for ma'lumat or information. And like most people, sometimes they read and they forget what they read immediately afterwards. So what was that book about? You ask him, he can't tell you one sentence. But if we read for ideas, so like it's impossible. We don't have the photographic memory of Sayyid Nursi, but we can remember the key ideas, arguments, maybe some fundamental facts as well. We have a lifetime of learning, and also it would be good to also have hobby sciences. Like for example, for me, astronomy is a hobby science. I went to the other day, the Macquarie University Astronomy Night, and there were 1,000 people there. I was amazed. They had these telescopes. I looked at the moon through a telescope for the first time. I mean, these days Hubble photos are there, so you don't have to go through a telescope. But looking through a telescope is amazing. The moon was beautiful, very close up. I saw the rings of the Saturn as well. Anyway, they had these astronomers, academics, astronomers gave talks, and most of them were very introductory. And in the question time, in one of them, somebody asked, "What's the closest galaxy to us?" The astronomer said Andromeda galaxy, but she couldn't remember how far. I said 2.5 million light years away. She said, "Do you know?" I said, "Yeah, 2.5 million. That's the fact." There's actually another close galaxy, Triangulum galaxy. It's 3 million light years away. Like I'm just trying to say to you that the astronomer could not answer, but I answered. Maybe it was just a fluke. But we need to have these hobby sciences as well, I really think. Because sometimes you can't, studying theology is a bit too much taxing on the mind. For entertainment, you've got to read other things, just to rest your mind. It's easier to read and enjoyable, Yes, sister.
Jazakallah khairan for that inspiring talk, Brother Mehmet. Just captivated by the first stream that you mentioned and what the Prophet ﷺ said to him, that you will be granted knowledge if you do not ask any questions from my ummah. Did he ever reflect on that later in his writings about that particular dream, and if that linked to him later on saying, "I won't get my knowledge from anything or from any teacher except from the Quran"?
In relation to, he talks about, Quran. After that letter, he reads the letter from Imam Rabbani and say, "Make Qibla," because I decided to take Quran as my Imam.
To me that was linked, maybe not deliberately, but it was sort of linked to that dream where he no longer has a teacher. His teacher is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even when he read that book, he found it very, very painful. I don't know. I just felt that perhaps did he ever reflect on the fact that maybe he was always meant to just stick to the Quran and that was his mission in life?
Well, yes, but I don't know. Like he doesn't link all these dreams because it would be talking about himself. Actually, I read somewhere he says, all these people who want to visit me, they're just trying to visit a saint. They think that they're visiting a saint. If you're coming with that intention, don't come. He says, I don't like myself. I don't like the people who like me. He goes, I have three personalities. He goes, there's one side, I mean, all these scholars, they're very humble and they see themselves very lowly, you know. There's one side, if I tell you, you'll run away from me. He goes, I don't want to tell you that. He goes, but the second side is me as the announcer of the Quran. But he uses that a lot, announcer of the truths of the Quran. He even said, we're serving to the truths of Iman and Quran. Actually, that word is khidmat. I think that's where the word khidma comes from. It's become the name of the movement. Sometimes the Nur movement, or Nurju, that's also called, he uses that as well, the light movement. Yeah, so he goes, for that I'm a representative of the Quran. So in that respect, I take that seriously. And because then there's me as Abdullah when I enter into the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I don't want anyone to disturb me. That's a special moment. Right? He says, I have these three hal, or states. Like he always talks about the Quran, basically, going back to the Quran. And, but he does sometimes narrate from other scholars in his books, just rarely. But those dreams were, I think, guiding him through his life. And in a way, as you know, those kind of dreams are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so he's been guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we never see him follow a scholar in a way that he would become his disciple. That's quite interesting. He just goes to him and says, what are you teaching? He says, all right, this book. He says, okay, can I study with you? He says, yeah. Memorizes, comes back, he says, test me. He tests, then he becomes his student. After that. Yeah. All right, thank you very much. Inshallah. This completes our Great Figures of Islam course just before Ramadan, and inshallah maybe another course, another series. We can all be with you. Inshallah. Have a good night.